A solitary rancher. He buys 3 virgins. What did he do with them? It left everyone in shock. Have you ever heard of a young, handsome, and rich rancher who shocked an entire town by buying 3 young women as if they were property? Well, that's exactly what happened in the heart of rural Appalachia, in a time when a person's honor and reputation were worth more than gold. But what he did with them, no one could have imagined. And I'll tell you right now, if you watch this story all the way to the end, you'll understand why this case is still remembered today with tears and astonishment. Before I start telling you, let me know what state you're watching this video from. Write it down in the comments because I really want to know. And go ahead and subscribe to the channel because strong and moving stories like this one can only be found here. I want you to imagine the red dirt road cutting through the pastures, the smell of wet grass after a light rain, and in the distance, the lowing of cattle. This is the landscape where Michael lives. He's 28 with broad shoulders, arms like oak trunks, and a deep, old sadness hidden in his heart. His face is handsome, but his gaze holds the remnants of a night that never gave way to mourning. The ranch he inherited from his father is about 40 minutes from the main square of Serenity Creek, a small town where everyone knows you by your first name and the sound of your truck horn. In the big farmhouse with the long front porch, everything has a time. Black coffee at 5, the corral at 6, the counting of the herd before high noon, and the religious silence when the afternoon breaks with the church bell. Michael is the kind of man who doesn't shout. He speaks low, and everyone listens. On the morning our story begins, Michael left early, his cowboy hat set low, his shirt open at the chest, already slick with sweat from his chores. Courage, the brown horse that had been with him since he was a teenager, nudged his hand with its nose, as if asking permission to enter its owner's thoughts. "Let's go, my friend," Michael said, stroking the animal's neck. "Today's the day we settle an old score." He said nothing more. He didn't need to. Courage seemed to understand what men don't want to say. The one who takes care of the farmhouse is Mrs. Aziza, a woman in her early 50s, firm with her words and gentle with her heart. She was the one who raised Michael after his mother passed away when he was just a boy. "You barely sleep, son," she commented, setting a plate of biscuits on the table. "That burden isn't a new one." Michael picked up his cup and thought for a few seconds before answering. "A burden is paid for with work, Mrs. Aziza, and with courage, too." "Courage you have," she replied. "What's missing is forgiving what happened." He swallowed his coffee like it was a thorn and didn't respond. In the yard, the ranch hands were already waiting for instructions. Nick, a 34-year-old and Michael's right-hand man, came with his notebook. "Boss, there's a busted fence down by the creek, and we're missing a calf in the cane thicket." "Fix the fence first," Michael said. "We'll find the mistake later." Nick nodded but looked at his boss carefully. "You're going into town today, aren't you?" "I'm going to take care of some old business. If I need you, I'll call you." The voice was calm, but there was a thread of steel within it. "It's important for you to know. Michael wasn't born hard. He became that way. It happened after he lost his fiancée, Anna Lee, in a silly wagon accident that turned into a tragedy because of a sudden rainstorm and a poorly built bridge. Since that day, his laughter had left the house like a light that goes out and is slow to return. The whole town saw it and the town remembers. At Mr. Dawson's general store, comments run faster than the tab. "Such a young man, but so closed off," one woman whispered, adjusting the handkerchief on her head. "Closed off, my foot. He's just proud," another retorted. "He must be hiding something." And what no one knows, I'll tell you, what Michael is hiding isn't a sin. It's fear. The fear of repeating his loss. The fear of seeing life rip away once again what he swore to protect. At noon, the sun hit the roof like a hammer. Michael went to the barn, opened his father's old wooden chest, and took out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, an old contract, a letter, and a yellowed photograph. Looking at it was always an effort, but he stared at the paper with the resolve of a man preparing for a reckoning. "It's time," he murmured. "If they're in danger, I won't turn my back." Mrs. Aziza appeared at the door, drying her hands on her apron. "Michael, take your mother's rosary. It's not heavy, it won't get in your way, and sometimes it helps with what you can't see." He accepted the rosary as if it were an ancient order from his blood. Thank you. If I'm back late, don't wait up with dinner. I'll wait up with the light on. A man who goes to do what's right never returns in the dark. Before mounting, Michael walked to the corral, leaned his head against the fence post, took a deep breath, and spoke to the wind as if he were confessing. I will not allow them to do to them what they have already done to so many. As long as I have strength in this arm, no one will be treated like a thing. Courage pawed the ground, impatient to leave. Michael mounted and rode off, not with the gallop of a hurried man, but with the urgency of someone who knows dignity has a scheduled time. On the way, he crossed paths with Reverend Henry, 70 years old, with a worn-out old Bible and a frayed hat. Son, may God keep you safe. Keep everyone safe, Reverend, especially those who have no voice. The Reverend placed a hand on his stirrup. When the justice of men sleeps, the courage of one can awaken a whole town. Michael bowed his head in thanks and continued on. Now listen, I know the town will say many things when he arrives. They will point, they will accuse, they will make things up. And I also know that days later, when everyone discovers the real reason behind Michael's actions, no one will be able to lay their head on their pillow without remembering what was said so unjustly. But that, I'll show you at the right time. For now, hold on to this image. A handsome, strong 28-year-old man riding down an old road on a brown horse, carrying in his heart the memory of the woman he lost, and in his hands the courage that could change the fate of people he barely knows yet. The town of Serenity Creek seemed frozen in time. It was the end of the 1960s, when television was still a rare luxury and the battery-powered radio reigned in kitchens. The streets were of packed dirt, and the smell of burnt wood came from simple adobe houses, where the wood-burning stove didn't just cook, but also warmed the soul on cold nights. In the main square, men in felt hats gathered in the gazebo to gossip about the news that came late from the newspaper, and women in patterned dresses carried canvas bags back from the general store. In the middle of it all, the church bell rang at 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening, marking the rhythm of life as if it were a sacred clock. It was into this scene that Michael rode, mounted on Courage, the brown horse that drew attention everywhere it went. The sound of hooves hitting the stone made some heads turn. Some whispered, others fell silent. It wasn't common to see that rancher in the center of town, and when he did appear, it was always surrounded by mystery. The biggest commotion was at the auction barn, a long wooden building that smelled of dry straw, sweat, and anticipation. Everything was sold there: cattle, horses, land, and in that cruel time, people too. It was an old custom, inherited from hard times, that many criticized in secret, but few had the courage to face in public. Inside the barn, the crowd was divided into two groups: the rich men, with money in their pockets and a thirst for power, and the poor who saw in it the chance to survive, even if it meant selling what they had that was most precious. On the platform, the auctioneer, Mr. Vance, with a thick mustache and a voice like thunder, prepared to open another round. "Gentlemen, today we have rare goods," he announced, adjusting his hat. 3 young women from humble families, but with fine bearing. Who will start the bidding? The silence that followed was heavy. At the back of the room, a father with tired eyes wiped away tears with a handkerchief. It was Mr. Raymond, a farmhand, who, unable to support his daughters, was forced to surrender them to the fate of the auction. Next to him, the 3 young women waited, their heads down, trying not to let their fears show on their faces. Michael walked in, took off his hat, and moved slowly to the front. The chatter grew. Some men exchanged glances. Others smiled with irony. "Look who showed up," one mumbled. "The solitary rancher coming to get some company," another said, laughing. But Michael didn't respond. He just stared at Mr. Vance, who gave an uncomfortable smile. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Michael," the auctioneer said, "care to participate as well?" Michael rested his strong hands on the wooden counter. "How much are you asking for the 3 of them?" The whole room gasped at the boldness. No one ever asked direct questions like that. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Well, we can start at $2,000 each." "I'll pay $10,000 for the 3 right now," Michael interrupted, pulling a wad of bills from his pocket and throwing it on the table. The silence turned into shock. No one dared to match the bid. People just watched in disbelief. Mr. Vance scratched his head, adjusted his jacket, and announced a little awkwardly, "Sold to Mr. Michael from the Triple Ridge Ranch." The three young women looked up for the first time. Claire, the youngest, with pale skin and blue eyes, couldn't believe what she was seeing. Helen, with delicate features, bit her lip to hold back tears. Rose, stronger in spirit, crossed her arms in a gesture of defiance. The townspeople whispered, pointed, and made up stories in seconds. "He's lost his mind. He's going to make them his slaves. That man's worse than I thought." But Michael simply turned his back, firm, motioned for the three to follow him, and walked out of the barn. The sound of the whispers was left behind, but the memory of that day was etched in every gaze that followed him to the door. Outside, under the hot midday sun, Michael took a deep breath, adjusted his hat, and said in a low voice, almost to himself, "As long as I have blood running in my veins, no one will lay a hand on you." The young women didn't understand what he meant. For them, it felt like imprisonment. For him, it was protection. This contrast between what seemed to be and what actually was in that time and place was what fueled the tragedy and the shock the town would never forget. When Michael left the barn, the sun was blazing down on the Serenity Creek Square, and the town's chatter followed behind them like a swarm. The three women walked a few steps behind, not knowing if this was the beginning of imprisonment or salvation. Claire, 20, with beautiful pale skin, watched the ground as if looking for a way out in the cracks in the dirt. Helen, 19, delicate, held her own wrist to keep from trembling. Rose, 21, tough on the outside and tired on the inside, faced the world as if she had already fought with fate more than once. "Ladies," Michael said, turning calmly, "the road to the ranch is long. We'll ride in silence for now. When we get there, you'll eat, rest, and then we'll talk." Rose raised her chin, ready to give a sharp reply, but held the words back. His tone was not that of an owner. It was of someone who carried a burden or a promise. On the road, Courage's hooves struck the dirt, kicking up a light dust. Michael offered the saddle to one of them, taking turns. Claire was the first. She sat in front, fidgeting with her fingers, and felt the horse's warm, rhythmic breathing. "He's gentle," Michael said. "You can trust him, Claire," he almost whispered. "The horse understands a person's heart, understands more than most people." He didn't say anything else. The arrival at the ranch came with the smell of coffee and baking bread. Mrs. Aziza appeared on the porch in her usual apron. "My heavens, Michael." She stopped, sizing up the three with a mother's eyes. "Come in, girls. There's fresh water, food, and a clean room." Rose crossed her arms. "With a key on the inside," Mrs. Aziza added, with a firm smile. "No man comes in here unless you want him to." Michael just nodded, letting the phrase land where it needed to. In the guest room were 3 wooden beds, patchwork quilts, and a small window that looked out onto the plum orchard. Helen leaned her forehead against the glass and cried softly. "I was going to save up money to leave home," she said, her voice choked. "Then my father's debt came and I became a bill to be paid." Rose sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder. "My stepfather said I was the cause of everything," she said, holding back her anger. "If I didn't put myself out there, my little brothers would have suffered." Claire clutched a crumpled medal to her chest. "My mother gave me this before she brought me to the auction," she said, turning the medal between her fingers. "She said to come back when you can. I don't even know if back has an address." Mrs. Aziza tapped lightly on the door. "The bath is ready. Clean clothes are on the chair. You can eat afterward." Helen hesitated. Do we owe you, ma'am?" "You owe nothing," she replied. "Food to kill hunger is the duty of whoever has it." In the kitchen, the sound of the wood-burning stove and the aroma of chicken stew and bay leaves filled the air. Michael stood, leaning against the door frame, his hat in his hand. "First thing tomorrow, we'll see where each of you fits in," he said without being demanding. "There's light work, the garden, sewing, the hen house. There's no rushing, no yelling, and no one here is a piece of property." Rose shot back, her voice sharp. "Then why did you pay for us in front of everyone?" He held her gaze. A few seconds of silence passed. "Because there were worse people who wanted to do worse things." The answer fell like a rock into a deep well. It didn't explain everything. It explained enough for that night. Later, under the light of a lantern, each of them faced her past in silence. Helen took an unfinished piece of lace from her bag and ran her finger along the thread, remembering the fiancé who went to the gold mines and never returned. Rose cleaned her nails with the blade of a small sewing knife, as if scraping off what life had stuck to her. Claire listened to the wind at the window and, for the first time since the square, breathed without hurry. Outside, Michael walked to the corral. Courage stamped his hoof impatiently. "Easy, partner," Michael said, stroking his mane. "They don't understand what we're doing today. One day they will." Nick, the foreman, appeared, his hat pulled down tight. "Boss, the town is buzzing. I heard some of them want to come here to teach you a lesson. Whoever sets foot on this land to do harm will go back down the road loaded with shame," Michael said firmly. "But I don't want to fight. Tell them no one here is a prisoner. The people won't listen. Then they'll see. It takes time to see, but it teaches." The next morning, the ranch's routine adjusted to the new pace. Helen found the sewing machine, which hummed softly as she repaired sheets and created skirts from leftover fabric. Rose followed Mrs. Aziza to the garden, learning the feel of good soil and the respect for water from the well. Claire went to the corral, where Courage snorted into her hand and rested his head on her shoulder, as if recognizing her helplessness and giving her strength. Michael watched from a distance, not to monitor them, but to ensure that the promise he made without speaking was being kept. Respect. At noon, everyone sat down at the large dining table. It's important for you to imagine this scene: the steaming plate, the shy smile on Helen's face when Mrs. Aziza praised her dress hem, the way Rose tasted the stew twice to make sure it was really good, and Claire, who had barely eaten since the auction, taking a second helping of rice as if giving her body permission to exist. Michael broke the silence. "There's something you need to know. In town, they'll talk about me, they'll talk about you, they'll say lies as if they were true. In here, no one will touch you without your consent. If you want to leave, you can. But if you stay, we'll put your home and your name in the right place." Rose's eyes narrowed. "Our name in the right place? What does that mean?" He took a breath, measuring the right time to say it. "It means paperwork, a document, something that guarantees tomorrow." Claire frowned. "Paperwork that we sign when it's safe." That word, safe, hung in the air like an untied promise, ready to be fastened later on. In the afternoon, the inevitable arrived at the gate. 3 men from town, hats pulled low, intentions high. Nick got there first. "What do you want?" "To see the girls, check if they're alive." Michael emerged from behind him, his steps firm. "They're alive and working like anyone else." "The people are saying you're—" "The people say I do." Michael cut him off without raising his voice. "If you want news, ask them." Claire took a deep breath and walked out onto the porch. Helen and Rose stood at her side. "We're eating, sleeping, and working," Claire said. "If you have more questions, ask with respect." The men looked at each other, spat on the ground for lack of an argument, and left, taking with them the sight they didn't want to see: 3 women standing with their heads held high. That night, as Helen sewed by lamplight, she spoke without looking up. "I never thought I'd hear myself talk about the future." Rose smiled faintly. "The future's a wild thing. If you face it, it'll calm down." Claire, with the metal between her fingers, asked, "What if the future asks a high price?" Michael's voice came from the doorway, soft, almost a plea. "If it does, we'll pay it together." Now you see how the ranch stopped being just a setting and became a crossroads. 3 lives that seemed lost, 1 man who everyone judged, and a thread of truth that hadn't yet been fully revealed. What seems hard today will change its name. When the right moment comes, you'll understand why. Pain and suffering were the bridge that joined 2 fates. If this story has already touched your heart, leave a like and a comment so it can reach more people, and we can keep bringing you stories that deserve to be remembered. When the sun began to set behind the ridge and the afternoon turned to copper, the town of Serenity Creek was already in an uproar. The events of the auction didn't take long to spread. The sharp tongues of the place were unforgiving, and every street corner seemed like a court of judgment. At Mr. Dawson's general store, where men gathered to weigh coffee and eyeball sugar, the talk was of nothing else. $10,000 all at once, Mr. Dawson, a farmhand exclaimed, slamming his hand on the counter. The man's lost his mind. Who pays so much for 3 virgins? Another retorted, lowering his voice. They say he didn't buy them out of kindness, but for revenge. He's going to use the girls to quiet the pain he's got inside. Mr. Dawson, an old man with a long beard, just shook his head. Michael was never a man of many words, but his silence is heavy, and where there's heavy silence, there's a big secret. At the church, women with veils and rosaries in their hands whispered before the evening service. Those poor girls, they've become captives in the hands of a lonely man, or worse, they've become a currency of vanity. Another bitter woman added. Reverend Henry heard the murmuring, sighed, and replied, Don't judge without knowing. He who carries a cross sometimes finds a path that the eyes of the people cannot see. But the warning fell on ears that preferred the taste of gossip to the weight of truth. At the general store, the most audacious men let out provocations. I'd like to see the look that ranchers face when those 3 decide to run off. Run off? Are you crazy? Who's going to run away from good food, a clean bed, and a rich boss's full pocket? And the mocking laughter echoed through the store, feeding the suspicion even more. Meanwhile, on the road that connected the town to the ranch, Nick, the foreman, already knew about the buzz. When he found Michael near the corral, he warned him, Boss, people are calling you everything. Some say you've lost your mind, others that you've become a criminal in disguise. Michael, his hat low, stroked Courage's back and answered in a calm voice, He who speaks doesn't know. He who knows doesn't speak. But they're plotting to come here. They say they're going to take the girls by force. Michael raised his eyes, which were as serious as steel. If they come, they'll find the truth. But I won't bow my head. On the porch, Claire overheard part of the conversation. Her heart raced, and she approached slowly, asking, They want to take us away? Michael took a deep breath. They do, but not for you. They want to get to me. Claire looked at him without blinking. And what if they succeed? He answered without trembling. They won't. As long as I have strength, you are no longer anyone's property. That same night, Helen wrote a short letter, hidden on a piece of paper she had saved from her sewing. The words trembled. Mother, I'm alive. I don't know for how long, but I am. Pray for me. She put the note under her pillow, not brave enough to deliver it. Rose, for her part, didn't stay silent. She sat in front of Michael on the porch, lit by the lantern, and spoke directly. I know what they're saying about you. I know in town they're calling us slaves and you a monster. Michael was silent. If it's true, say so now. I can handle it. He looked into her eyes. The truth will come at the right time, Rose, but it's not the one they're spreading. Rose sighed deeply as if she didn't want to believe him, but couldn't find a lie in his eyes. And so, between the malice of the town's words and Michael's heavy silence, a taut rope was formed, ready to snap. Every whisper increased the suspicion. Every malicious glance reinforced the idea that something terrible was happening on that ranch. But the truth? The truth was still hidden, kept like a knife in a sheath, waiting for the right moment to be shown. The ranch, so vast and full of life, also seemed like a place of echoes. Every corner held a thick silence, as if the walls knew the secrets no one dared to speak. For the 3 young women, that silence was at once a refuge and an invisible prison. In the first week, there was almost no laughter, just the sound of footsteps, of water hitting the rock, of Helen's sewing machine trying to fill the time with thread and needle. Claire took refuge near the corral where Courage, the brown horse, accepted her caresses without asking for anything in return. Rose, the toughest, busied herself in the garden, pulling weeds with such force that it seemed she wanted to pull out her own pain as well. On one of those afternoons, Helen, with trembling hands, was sewing in silence when Claire entered the room. You didn't sleep again, did you? Claire asked, pulling up a chair. Helen lowered her head, hiding the tears that fell without permission. When I close my eyes, I hear my father's voice calling me a dead weight, that I was only good enough to be sold. It's impossible to sleep with that voice in my head. Claire held her hand firmly. We're not dead weight or currency. We're going to prove it. In the kitchen, Rose was washing vegetables when Mrs. Aziza approached slowly. Girl, your arm is going to give out with all that force. Working with anger will even ruin the soil. Rose stopped, took a deep breath, and let the water run through her fingers. I feel hate, ma'am. Hate for the one who brought me here. Hate for being reminded every day that I'm someone's leftover. Mrs. Aziza put a hand on her shoulder. Anger keeps us on our feet, but if you only drink from it, it'll poison you. Give it time. Meanwhile, Michael kept his distance, as if he knew his presence was both protection and a threat. At night, sitting on the porch, he would hear the muffled sobs that escaped from the women's room. He would hold his mother's rosary between his fingers, squeezing it, but he wasn't brave enough to knock on the door. Nick appeared one time and commented, "Boss, if you don't talk, they'll never trust you." Michael took a deep breath. Some pain can't be explained, Nick. Some pain only time can make a path for the words to come out. On a rainy morning, Claire found her courage. She went to Michael, who was adjusting Courage's saddle, and looked at him firmly. Why did you bring us here? If we're not prisoners, then what are we? Michael stopped what he was doing, took a deep breath, and answered softly, Your lives I didn't let die at the auction. Claire frowned. And what's going to happen to us now? He looked away, stroking the horse's mane. Now we wait for fate to show us. But as long as you're here, no one will touch you without your consent. That answer didn't bring peace, but it sparked a new doubt, because behind the harshness, there was truth. That man, judged by everyone, seemed to carry more pain than malice. That night, when Helen finally fell asleep, Claire whispered to Rose, He doesn't talk like an owner. He talks like someone who's hiding something else. Rose scoffed, pulling the sheet over her head. Whatever it is, it hasn't taken away our fear yet. And so, between the pain that each of them carried and Michael's silence, a fragile bridge was formed. No one knew if it would lead to freedom or tragedy, but everyone was already tied to a thread that would break sooner or later. Now tell me, if you were in the place of those three young women, would you have believed Michael's words, or would you have remained suspicious of him? In the days that followed, life on the ranch found a new rhythm, a rhythm of care. It wasn't a care of pretty words, it was a care of actions. Fresh water in the room, clean clothes without anyone having to ask. The squeaky door was oiled. The window opened without effort. When a house begins to breathe, it's because there's someone behind the scenes setting things right. And that someone was Michael. Early in the morning, he would leave before the sun broke through the mist, hat on his head and his mother's rosary in his shirt pocket. Courage could tell when he was serious. He marched differently, more alert. On one of these trips, Michael stopped in town, went into Mr. Barnett's county clerk's office without a fuss, and placed a stack of papers on the counter. The clerk raised his glasses. Well, Michael, what's all this paperwork? Employment contracts, 3 of them, with a salary, days off, and housing, he answered, taking a pen from his pocket. I want them registered, stamped, and with a copy. Mr. Barnett scratched his chin. For whom? For those who work for me, women, people. Michael cut him off, his voice soft but firm. The clerk understood that the conversation had a limited time. He stamped them, handed them over, and stored his curiosity in an envelope along with the copies. On the way back, Michael stopped at Mr. Dawson's store and asked for more groceries, good flour, bacon, sugar, kerosene for the lantern, thread, and sewing needles. Mrs. Aziza was grateful when she saw. That's enough for a month, man. It's enough for peace, too, he said without elaborating. At the lunch table, the 3 women were surprised when he arrived with a black-covered notebook. It's the house notebook, he explained. Everything you do here will be written down. What you planted, what you sowed, how much came in and how much went out. Your names go beside it. Helen touched the cover without the courage to open it. My name in a notebook? That's how a story that doesn't get lost begins, Mrs. Aziza added. Paper keeps what other people's mouths twist. Rose, suspicious, asked, And what if one day we want to leave? Michael pointed to the last blank page. When the time comes, the last line will be yours. Slowly, signs began to tell what Michael wouldn't. One afternoon, 2 men with thin mustaches and crooked words arrived at the gate. Nick hesitated, but Michael went to meet them. "You took something that belonged to us, rancher," said the older one, adjusting his belt. "You cut into a deal that was already closed." Michael raised his gaze. "A deal is for a bull or a fence, not for people, not with me." "You'll regret this." "I've already regretted what I had to. The rest I can handle." The men spat to the side and left, leaving the foul smell of a threat in the air. Claire, who was watching from a distance, felt her skin prickle. It wasn't just fear, it was a premonition. At the end of that night, Michael opened his father's chest and took out a yellowed envelope. Inside, an old photograph. He was younger beside Annalie, the fiancée whom the rain had taken. His eyes became glassy, but his hand didn't tremble when he folded the paper. "Miss Anne." Aziza saw it. "You don't need to punish yourself every day," she said softly. "I'm not punishing myself. I'm remembering. Remembering isn't a punishment, son. It's a warning not to repeat the world's mistakes." He nodded without saying that the memory was the map of what he was doing. Helen was the first to notice another detail. At the end of the day, without anyone asking, Michael would leave 3 brown envelopes on the kitchen counter, each with a small amount of money and a simple note, in a straight script, "For today's work." At first, they refused. "We don't want charity," Rose said. "It's not charity, it's payment," Michael replied. "Whoever works gets a signed paper and a counted salary." He turned his back, letting the custom take root. One windy afternoon, Reverend Henry appeared on the porch, holding his hat so it wouldn't fly away. "I came to ask for the help of anyone who wants to lend a hand at the chapel's community project," he said with a tired smile. Helen stepped forward. "I'll embroider altar cloths." Rose raised her hand. "I'll help paint." Claire took a breath and added, "I can sing on Sunday, Reverend." Michael watched in silence. The Reverend approached him. "The town judges, but God sees," he'd murmured. "And when he sees, he puts every piece in its place." "I hope he's in a hurry," Michael said. "God isn't in a hurry. He has the right time." Michael looked at the 3 women, smiling slightly for the first time in a long time. "Then may the right time find this house." In the days that followed, courage became a bridge. Claire, who had barely touched food when she arrived, got used to brushing the horse and speaking softly to him, as if the animal understood what people couldn't hear. One afternoon, Michael found Claire in the corral, her head resting against the horse's neck. "Does he listen to you?" he asked. "He listens better than most people," she answered, without taking her head from his mane. "I listen too," Michael said after a moment. "It might not seem like it, but I listen." Claire looked up. For a second, she saw an old wound there that couldn't be spoken. On Saturday, Mr. Vance, the auctioneer, sent a message through the general store boy. "I need to talk." Michael went to the back room of the auction barn. The man closed the door and weighed every syllable. "You took a deal out of the hands of some powerful people. You're getting into a nasty fight." "I'll fight what I can pay for," Michael replied. "And how will you pay for the town's gossip?" "With the truth." "Whose truth?" "The one that stands when the lie gets tired." Mr. Vance chewed on the corner of his mustache. "Some people don't get tired, Michael." "They don't, but some things the light of day clarifies without needing permission." The auctioneer took a folded paper from his pocket. "I heard where they were going to send the 3 of them if it wasn't for you." "That's not what my father taught me when he taught me how to use the gavel." Michael took the paper without opening it. "Thank you. The rest is on me." Back at the ranch, he didn't tell the women about the note. He put it in the house notebook between the pages of what comes in and what goes out. It was too early to show them, but too late to back down. As the week went on, Helen began to hum a tune as she sewed. Rose learned to tell time by the smell of wet earth. Claire started eating better, sleeping better, and talking without apologizing. The silence of the house was changing. From a silence of fear, it became a silence of attention. On a night with a wide moon, Michael stopped at the kitchen threshold. The 3 were sitting, sharing a plate of cornbread cake that Mrs. Aziza had just taken from the oven. He cleared his throat, not knowing how to begin. "I'm going to town early tomorrow. If anyone asks about you, tell them the truth. That you're working, that you're free, that you're getting paid." Rose looked at him. "And if they ask why?" "Tell them that whoever wants to know why should come talk to me, eye to eye." He made to leave but came back. And Claire? She turned, surprised by his intimate tone. The fence post down by the creek is loose. If you ride courage, call someone to go with you. Claire smiled slightly, almost laughing for the first time. I will, she said. Michael nodded and left. He left behind a trail of unsaid things, all pointing in the same direction. Yes, slowly the secrets were revealing themselves in the stamped papers from the county clerk's office, in the money counted with respect, in the uncomfortable visits that left without an answer, in the notes kept in the notebook, in the eyes of a man who had chosen to carry the world's blame to spare those who barely knew their own name on a piece of paper. No speeches, just actions. And actions, when they are repeated, become the truth. The town didn't know it yet. It would still hurt. It would still accuse. But inside that house, step by step, a story was being built that didn't fit in the whispers of the gazebo. The story of three women trying to relearn how to exist and of a man dealing with his own night, waiting for the right dawn. The ranch, with its long days and quiet nights, began to reveal a transformation no one had predicted. Michael, who had lived closed off in himself, slowly began to let himself be approached by a presence he didn't expect. Claire. Among the three, she was the one who most sought to understand what was behind that man with strong arms and such a burdened look. One afternoon, the sun still high in the sky, Claire was in the corral, helping to throw corn to the chickens. When Michael approached, he was carrying a bucket of water and stopped beside her, watching. You're not afraid to get your hands dirty, are you? He commented, almost shyly. Claire looked up, surprised by the attempt at conversation. Afraid? I'm afraid of people, not the earth. From the earth, you only get what you plant. He nodded, serious. It should be that way with people too. These simple exchanges became frequent. Claire discovered that Michael spent a good part of the night sitting on the porch, looking at nothing. On one of those occasions, she approached him, wrapped in a shawl. Can't sleep? She asked. I'm not the one the sleep has been avoiding for a long time. Is it because of her? Claire risked, knowing what the town gossiped about. Michael took a long time to answer, but finally his deep voice broke. Anna Lee, she was my beginning. The rain took her, and it took my laughter too. Ever since then, and all I've known how to do is work. Claire looked at him with compassion, but also with firmness. Pain doesn't disappear, but we can share it. He turned his face away, disconcerted. He wasn't used to being looked at like that, without judgment, with a past. Her presence was becoming a relief. While Helen was drowning in memories and Rose was fighting her anger, Claire was searching for a truth in Michael's silence, and he, without realizing it, began to find a place to breathe in her. One afternoon, Claire asked to ride courage. Michael hesitated but finally gave in. He's strong, but he only accepts those who respect him. Claire laughed softly, just like his owner. Michael raised his eyes to her, surprised by her boldness, but he didn't retort. He just held the saddle firmly to help her get on. When Claire mounted and felt the horse's rhythm, a smile escaped her lips, the first one since she had been taken to the auction. When Michael saw that smile, something inside him trembled. In the kitchen, Mrs. Aziza noticed the new rhythm. That girl is getting to Mr. Michael, she said. He replied curtly, Don't talk nonsense, Mrs. Aziza. Nonsense, not at all. Even the wind has changed since she started smiling. Michael didn't argue. He just went out to the yard carrying the weight of a feeling he was trying to deny. One night, while Claire was embroidering on the porch, Michael sat close to her, something he never did. After a few minutes of silence, he said, Do you know why I brought you here? Claire looked at him, anxious. Because I couldn't stand the idea of seeing 3 lives become property for dirty people. Her eyes filled with tears. But you sacrificed yourself. Everyone speaks badly about you. He sighed, I can handle the weight of the town's gossip, but I couldn't handle the weight of letting you suffer. It was on that night that Claire understood. That man, so talked about and judged, was in fact a heart fighting against his own pain. And it was also on that night that Michael realized he wasn't as alone as he thought. The connection between the two began there, a silent one, made of small gestures, lingering glances, and words that, when spoken, sounded like balm for open wounds. The pain was still present, but now, for the first time, there was a crack for something bigger, something that could turn suffering into hope. And it's at this point that the story begins to gain another kind of strength. Because when two pains meet and recognize each other, a bond is born that time cannot erase. By the way, have you already subscribed to the channel? If you like emotional stories from the past, full of twists and turns, subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapters of this story. When the week turned, the town of Serenity Creek was boiling like a kettle left on the fire. The auction still hammered in the people's ears, but now it was seasoned with new stories, each one more twisted than the last. They said Michael had locked the girls in the cellar, that he was training in the horse to chase them, that a solitary man wouldn't spend so much money for charity. The more the truth tried to walk, the more the lie stepped on its heels. At Mr. Dawson's store, the words carried the weight of a sentence. "This won't do, Dawson. The man's always been a good guy, but anyone who buys people is wrong on principle," fired off Gary, a man with a rough way of speaking. "Right and wrong depend on the time and place," the old man retorted, wiping the counter. "Before you bring down the gavel on someone else's head, you'd better know the ground you're standing on." Ben, Gary's friend, slammed a coin on the counter. "I'm telling you, today it's 3. Tomorrow it'll be the whole town kneeling to this rancher. We need to go over there and get those girls." At Sunday Mass, the murmuring didn't even respect Reverend Henry's Latin. At the gazebo after the service, half a dozen men gathered, their words full of courage and their eyes full of fear. "If we don't do anything, it'll become a custom," one said. "Let's bring in the law," another suggested. "Call the sheriff." "The law! His law is money!" The message reached the ranch through the mouth of Nick, who was sweating from the rush. "Boss, they're planning to come as a mob tonight. They say it's to free the girls." Michael stroked Courage's neck, and the horse snorted as if sensing a storm. "Nick, no one here wants a fight, but I will not compromise their dignity. Go to Sheriff Arlo. Tell him that if they come, they should come with him and the Reverend. I'll open the gate." "Open the gate? He who has something to hide keeps it hidden. He who doesn't, shows it." Inside the house, Mrs. Aziza straightened the table, more tense than usual. Claire, Helen, and Rose looked at each other, a knot in each of their throats. "The whole town is against us," Helen murmured. "They're not against you, they're against me," Michael corrected, without raising his voice. Rose placed her anger where it belonged. "And we are them." Michael nodded, defeated by her truth. "You'll stand on the porch next to Mrs. Aziza. If they ask questions, answer what you want. If you don't want to talk, I'll talk. No one will touch you." Claire looked at Michael with a firmness that seemed to have been born in that instant. "If words can save, we'll talk." The late afternoon came with a purple sky and the smell of rain. In the distance, points of light appeared, lanterns hanging from sticks, like angry fireflies coming down the road. With every step, the dust rose and the whispers grew. Sheriff Arlo came first, hat in hand, accompanied by Reverend Henry. Behind them, Gary and Ben led the crowd. "The gate's open," Nick announced, his voice firm. Michael went to meet them, a lantern in one hand, the other extended, empty. "Good evening, Sheriff. Reverend, the house is open." Arlo looked at the crowd behind him. "Whoever speaks, speaks softly. Whoever acts, act by the law." On the porch, Claire, Helen, and Rose stood side by side, Mrs. Aziza between them. The lantern cast shadows on their faces, but did not hide their posture. There was no servitude in it. There was exhaustion and dignity. Gary stepped forward. Where were the girls?" Claire raised her chin. "Here. You're prisoners," Rose answered immediately. "Prison is hunger and threats. Here we eat and work." Ben spat on the ground. "Working for what? To pay for what?" Michael calmly took 3 stamped copies from his pocket and handed them to the sheriff. "Employment contracts. Name, job, pay." The sheriff read slowly under the watchful eye of the Reverend. "It's all by the book." "Papers can be arranged anywhere," Gary sneered. "I want to see what they want." Reverend Henry made a hand gesture. "Girls?" Helen took a deep breath. "I sew, I get paid by the day. I sleep in a clean bed. If I want to leave, I will." Rose added, "I plant. My hands are in the soil, not in fear." Claire looked at Michael before speaking and then said, I take care of the animals and myself. A glass pane shattered, a stone thrown by someone in the back. Courage reared up nervously, a brown flash in the clear setting. Nick took a step forward, but Michael held up an open palm. No one reacts. The sheriff turned sharply. Whoever threw that, hang your head and go home. You don't correct injustice with a rock. Ben still risked a shot. We have signed promissory notes from their father and stepfather. A debt is a debt. The word promissory note cut through the air like a blade. Michael stared at the man, and there, for an instant, the darkness he was hiding showed through. A debt is paid with work and dignity, not with people packed into a truck at night. Gary raised his eyebrows. What truck? Michael's face was unreadable. When the time comes, you'll find out. Reverend Henry crossed his hands, understanding more than the rest. That's enough for today. The sheriff returned the papers to Michael, turned to the crowd, and spoke in a voice that didn't allow for a retort. The girls are free, they're working and getting paid. Anyone who comes here uninvited is here to cause trouble, and this town has had enough of that. Disperse. The group broke apart with bitter grumbling, but a few faces remained. Gary, Ben, and two others with a look of people who would return. As they passed the gate, Ben snarled low, just for his friend to hear. If his law is paper, ours is collection. We'll be back. When the dust settled, the heavy silence and the broken window pane on the ground remained. Helen cried silently. Rose collected the shards as if gathering pieces of her own past. Claire stood on the edge of the step, watching the road that was swallowing the distant lanterns. Michael stopped beside her and asked without touching her, Are you hurt? No, then come in. No one's going to sleep late tonight. Mrs. Aziza wiped the window frame and said softly, The people's anger is a strong wind. If the house is solid, it can handle it. In the kitchen, the coffee was brewing again, as if the ritual were calling normality back. Nick moved his stool closer and said, If you want, I'll close the gate with a heavy chain in the morning. Keep the gate open, Nick. He who closes the gate closes off reason. Michael laid the copies in the house notebook between what comes in and what goes out. Claire watched the gesture. Will that hold back the town's gossip? Michael hesitated but answered, It will hold what's important, the truth, at the moment it's needed. That night, when everyone had retired, Michael stayed on the porch, his eyes lost. The sound coming from inside wasn't just crying. It was the quiet creaking of an old pane, making way for something else. Courage came close, resting his head on his owner's shoulder. I know, partner, Michael murmured. I know the road is long. And so the anger of the townsfolk didn't fall like lightning. It became a wind, drying faces and hearts, threatening a storm. On the other side of the fence, however, something else began to take root. The understanding that if the world wanted war, it was with peace that this house would resist. Tomorrow, the town would wake up to new rumors. Here, dawn would break with more work. And it's precisely when the street barks the loudest that the soul inside learns to speak softly and firmly. Time passed slowly on the ranch, but inside those walls, every minute seemed to carry a weight. Claire, Helen, and Rose had a bed, food, and even some peace from their work. But their hearts knew no rest. Their bodies were busy, but their souls wouldn't be quiet. At night, when the lantern went out, the ghost would come. Helen would wake up with a start, dreaming of her father's voice calling her a dead weight. Claire, lying on her side, would hold back her tears to not wake the others, clutching the medal her mother had given her before she was handed over at the auction. Rose, even tougher, had her nights haunted by her stepfather's screams and the faces of the little siblings she had left behind. One morning, Helen couldn't take it anymore and got up, walking to the kitchen. She found Mrs. Aziza preparing lemon balm tea. You don't sleep either, ma'am, Helen asked, wiping away her tears. He who carries a lot in his heart sleeps little, child, Mrs. Aziza replied, handing her a mug. Helen sighed, her voice choked. I can't forget that I was sold as if I were nothing. Mrs. Aziza held her hand. You weren't sold, you were saved. Even if you don't understand it now, one day you will. In the corral, Claire spent long minutes in silence with Courage, the horse. She would rest her head against the animal's neck and speak softly, as if he could carry the pain she couldn't release. Michael would watch from a distance, but he didn't interrupt. A man with his own scars knew how to respect the silence of another wounded soul. Rose, on the other hand, let her anger out in the garden. One day, Michael found her pulling weeds with such force that her fingernails were bleeding. "You're going to end up hurting yourself, Rose." She turned abruptly, her eyes flashing. "I've been hurt for a long time. This is nothing." Michael was silent for a few seconds, then replied, "A wounded soul doesn't heal with your arms, but I understand." She let go of the weeds, took a deep breath, and for the first time, didn't reply with irony. Their suffering was not limited to the memory of the auction, but to the shame of carrying the town's mark on their shoulders. Even from a distance, they knew what was being said. Helen once heard a traveler at the gate whisper, "Those three are the rancher's virgins." She froze. That hurt her more than chains. On the porch, Claire said to Michael on a cloudy afternoon, "They call us the rancher's virgins," as if we were his property. Michael, his face grim, replied firmly, "You don't belong to anyone. Not to me, not to the person who would have paid to take you away. You belong to yourselves." Claire took a deep breath, but the pain was still there. "The people don't believe words, Michael. Then one day they will see with their own eyes." Even with food and shelter, the souls of the three women were still a battlefield. The town's whispers crossed the fence and echoed inside them. The weight of the pain, of family debts, of the shame of having been publicly exposed, none of it disappeared easily. And it's in this contrast that the story deepens. The protection that Michael offered couldn't erase the scars that fate had etched on them. But little by little, something was changing, and the world outside didn't yet know the strength that this pain held. Now I ask you, do these three women deserve justice? If you believe they do, leave a comment. Justice for Claire, Helen, and Rose. Morning was born with a smell of cold earth and crushed grass. There was a light mist coming down from the hills, the kind that seems to cover the soul so it doesn't feel so much. It was in this mist that Michael stood at the kitchen doorway, hat in hand, and called out, "Claire, if you want a ride, the trail is calm today." She looked up from the dishcloth, surprised. "Ride outside the corral?" "Outside, just to the creek bottom. If your heart tells you to turn back, we will." Mrs. Aziza exchanged a prayerful look with Claire, as if blessing her without words. "Take your shawl, girl. The morning wind likes an uncovered chest." In the yard, Courage was already waiting, brown like a hickory trunk, his eyes moist and alive. Michael stroked his mane and spoke softly as if he were talking to a person. "Be a home for her, partner." Claire approached slowly. The horse drew air through his nose, recognizing the scent that was now close. "He seems to understand everything," she said, smiling faintly. "He understands more than I do," Michael replied, half seriously, half joking. "Get on, I'll walk beside you." The saddle creaked with the sound of something old. Michael taught her with the patience of someone who learns before he teaches. Leg inside, a light hand. If you pull, pull a little. If you ask, ask simply. A horse doesn't like yelling. On the first step, Claire held her breath. On the second, she breathed. On the third, she smiled. And Courage, as if someone else's joy were a command, found a steady rhythm, making a path through the cane thicket. The fence at the creek bottom appeared ahead, and with it, the memory Michael had left behind days earlier. The loose post. He got down, planted his foot, pushed with his shoulder, and fixed the rails. "I'll replace this today. Go slow, I'll wait," Claire said. "No need, I'll go first. If the world is going to shake, let it shake for me first." He opened the gap, led Courage by the bridle, and the two crossed to the other side, where the field opened up like a book. On the other side, the light was different. The sun broke the mist into slices, and the stream whispered behind the rocks. Claire stood up straight, closing her eyes for a moment, as if drinking in the wind. "It smells like oranges and clean water," she said. "It smells like a road," Michael completed. They rode along the edge of the creek, listening to the sound of the small rapids. Michael walked, his hand on the bridle, attentive to every step. "Did the fiancé you lost like to ride?" Claire risked, her voice low so as not to hurt the morning. Michael took a moment. "She liked to race against the rain. She'd say if we got there before the downpour, the day wouldn't have any sadness. And one day, the rain caught up. Claire gently tightened the reins, feeling the weight of that memory. I'm not going to race today. I just want to go at the pace of my own heart. That's right. In a dip on the old road, a strange sound cut through the bird song. A truck engine. Michael froze, motioning for silence. From the trees, they saw a truck with a covered flatbed parked near the old quarry. 3 men got out. Michael recognized the walk of the one in front. It was one of the men who had been at the gate on the night of the lanterns. Get down, Claire, he whispered. No noise. She obeyed, her heart in her hands. The men opened the tarp. There were no people there. Crates and a large leather bag were passed quickly. A paper escaped from one of their pockets and flew, catching on a branch. The wind turned the page, and for a second, Claire read loose words without understanding the whole thing. Advance 3 pieces, night shipment, Gainesville. The truck snorted again and disappeared around the curve, leaving the smell of diesel and a shadow. Michael, what was that? He stayed for a while, looking at where the noise had come from. It's no good. I know those words. Not today, Claire. There was firmness and care in his answer, like someone holding a door for the right time. She didn't insist. The truth at that moment would hurt more than it would heal. They went back along the edge of the swamp in silence. Near the creek bottom, they got a scare. The ground gave way slightly where the water had softened the bank. Courage slipped with one of his front hooves. Claire faltered. Michael grabbed the reins in her leg in a single motion, holding the weight with his body. Stay with me. I'm right here. Courage reacted like an animal who knows his owner's voice. He dug in his other 3 hooves, took a breath, and regained his footing. Michael let go slowly, still pressed against the horse's flank, and he laughed. A short, nervous laugh of someone who sees tragedy pass by in the distance. Well, we almost gave Mrs. Aziza a heart attack. Claire breathed, her hands trembling. I thought I was going to fall. You don't fall. When we're careful, God lends a hand. Back at the upper corral, Michael taught her the short step, the half trot, the tight turn around the post. Claire learned to talk with her leg, not the rope, with calm, not with fear. And the more she trusted, the more Courage gave himself over to her. He's adopting you, Michael said, proud. He's giving me back, she replied without thinking. Michael frowned, trying to find the meaning. Giving me back, to the time before I ended up on that auction block. In the yard, Rose and Helen appeared, their hands dirty from the garden and their thread. Well, look at the cowgirl, Rose joked, a rare smile on her face. Helen held out her hand to pat Courage's nose. Does he understand music? He does, Michael said. A horse is an animal that keeps secrets and dances when sadness gives way. Helen hummed a little folk tune, and Courage twitched his ears as if approving of the tone. For the first time in many days, the 3 of them laughed together. It wasn't loud laughter. It was the laughter of people who remember they exist. Later, Nick brought the new wood for the fence post. Boss, you want me to straighten it now? Now. He planted it, hammered it in, and crossed the rails. The sound of the firm wood sounded like a sentence that fate needed to hear. There was nothing loose there anymore. Thanks, Michael said with his eyes. What's on the agenda for today, Nick? There's talk on the road. A truck passed by early coming from the quarry. I saw it. You want me to go take a look? Not yet. He who looks too early finds splinters. As dusk fell, Claire unsaddled Courage with the affection of someone returning a home to its owner. Mrs. Aziza watched from the porch, her hands crossed over her apron. Freedom has a scent, my child. I could smell it from here today. Claire rested her face on his mane one last time, her eyes welling up without shame. It was just a small piece of it. That's how we learn the taste. Inside the house notebook gained new lines. Claire learned the short step with Courage. She helped in the corral. Helen fixed 6 pillowcases, singing while she rested. Rose planted kale and green onions. A rare laugh, noted because it was deserved. Michael wrote slowly, as if carving into a tree trunk the day a tree began to give shade. On that early evening, while the sky turned from blue to indigo and the crickets tuned their instruments, the ranch seemed like a different place. The brown horse was no longer just a work animal. He had become a bridge between fear and courage, between the yard and the road, between what the town said and what the heart knew. Claire, who had left with her hands clenched, came back with them open. Michael, who had left with his soul armed, came back with it a little disarmed. And without anyone announcing it, the first step toward freedom had been taken. A short step, like the one he taught, but true enough to change the direction of the story. The night would still bring shadows, and the road still held sounds that no one wanted to hear. But on that day, under courage's firm hooves, freedom took a breath. And when freedom finds a breath, even pain looks for another name. The following days were seemingly calm, but Michael's heart grew heavier with each passing dawn. He knew he couldn't hide the reason he had spent so much money in front of the whole town. He carried in his pockets the papers that Mr. Vance had given him, that damn contract that spoke of a shipment and 3 pieces. The silence no longer protected him. On the contrary, the silence was turning into an enemy. On a rainy night, the wind shook the windows, and the lantern swayed in the kitchen. The 3 women were gathered near the wood-burning stove, trying to get warm, while Mrs. Aziza stirred a pot of thick stew. Michael came in, his hat still wet, his eyes hard. "We need to talk tonight," he said without preamble. The young women looked at each other, tense. Rose, as always, was the first to speak. "If you're going to tell us we are property, don't bother. We know what people say." Michael took a deep breath, pulled the envelope from his pocket, and put it on the table. "What people say isn't the truth. This is." Helen, curious, pulled the paper with trembling fingers. The reading was difficult, but the words hit like a hammer. Delivery of 3 virgins, advance payment, night transport, destination, brothel in Gainesville. Claire put her hand over her mouth in shock. This is what they were going to do with us?" Michael nodded, his voice choked. "You weren't bought, you were saved. If I hadn't raised my hand at the auction, you'd be being taken away today, never to return." The silence in the kitchen was broken only by the sound of the rain. Rose let a thick tear fall, but her voice came out firm. "So you bought our freedom." Michael looked at her, tired but serene. "I didn't buy it. I just paid the price of others' cowardice. Your freedom has no price." Helen stood up, her eyes wet with tears. "I didn't know if I should hate you or thank you. But now all I can do is cry to you." Mrs. Aziza touched her shoulders. "Cry, child. Tears are also a way to wash away a burden." Claire approached Michael slowly. Her eyes were red, but they shone. "You let everyone believe the worst. You let the whole town call you a monster. If it was to protect you, I would have let them call me something even worse." Claire couldn't hold back anymore. She hugged him tightly. Michael was rigid for a moment, but then, defeated, he let his body give way. That night, the truth went through the house like a lightning bolt that destroys, but also illuminates. The 3 young women, once trapped by fear, understood that they were protected by Michael's sacrifice. And Michael, in turn, realized that his old pain was mixing with their pain, creating something new. A connection made of suffering, but also of hope. When the rain let up and the wind stopped, the kitchen still held the warmth of that moment. The stew was steaming in the pot, but the real fire was burning in each of their hearts, the fire of revelation. And now I want to know from you, do you love emotional historical stories like this one? If so, leave a comment. I love the story because I know that just like me, you love stories from the past. The kitchen was too small for the truth. The paper on the table seemed to be on fire, as if the words were burning away all the doubt that remained. I saw when Claire put her hand to her chest and the metal hit her skin, when Helen sat down without looking at the chair and almost fell, when Rose, who was always a knife on the outside, turned to water on the inside. And I saw Michael, that man the town called a monster, relax his jaw as if finally letting go of his armor. "So that's what it was," Helen whispered, her eyes glued to the paper. "A truck at night for Gainesville." "That's what it was," Michael confirmed, his voice low but clear. "I let them say whatever they wanted about me, because sometimes the rush to explain things spoils the right time for the truth." Rose put both hands on the table, her whole body trembling. "I spent years thinking my destiny was to be beaten, to keep quiet and to become a number in someone's debt. And even so, Even then, we were almost shipped off like cargo. Mrs. Aziza came close and hugged her without many words. That kind of hug a mother gives when words get in the way. Cry, child. Not all tears are a sign of weakness. Some tears are a sign of what's to come. Claire raised her head slowly, her blue eyes wet with salt, and looked at Michael with a mixture of gratitude and pain. If you had told us sooner, we would have suffered less. I know, he replied. And it was the first time I heard guilt without a defense. But there were people watching, and a truth told at the wrong time becomes a target. I needed paper, a witness, and the right path. Nick appeared at the doorway, his hat in his hand. Boss, if you need someone to sign as a witness, I'll sign. Michael nodded. First thing in the morning, the county clerk's office. Tonight, the house needs to put itself back together. They all sat down. Mrs. Aziza served the thick stew. The smell of garlic and bay leaves filled the kitchen. And I swear it was as if the world, tired of being knocked around, asked for a minute to breathe. Helen took the first spoonful and broke into a quiet cry, the kind that washes the dust from the heart. Rose wiped her face with the back of her hand, half angry at her own tears. Claire held Michael's hand on the table, and he didn't pull away. There's more, Michael said after a moment, pulling a second envelope from his pocket. The men who came here at night didn't come just out of curiosity. There are powerful people in this scheme. He spread receipts, promissory notes, and a trail of names the town called respectable on the table. Mr. Vance, the auctioneer, had already signed a statement. I was pressured. I did not consent to the clandestine transport. Claire put her hand to her mouth again. And we were right there on the platform, and I was in the middle of it, Michael added. If I hadn't raised my hand, you would have been gone without a trace. The night passed, and the house, even exhausted from crying, woke up on its feet. The rooster crowed, the stove was lit, and there was a different feeling in the hallway. Helen wore her simplest dress, but smoothed her hair with care. Rose braided her hair. Claire put the metal inside her shirt, not to hide it, but to keep it safe. They all went to Mr. Barnett's office. The clerk raised his eyebrows when he saw the group come in, but he didn't ask questions. Michael placed the papers, lined up like a row of soldiers, the employment contracts, the auctioneer's statement, the receipts. I want everything stamped and a certified copy for each of them, Michael said. Mr. Barnett stamped them, the thick ink making a sound like a gavel on the door of the past. Sign here, ladies, the clerk instructed. Helen took the pen and stopped, her eyes welling up. I've almost never signed my name on a paper that looked back at me. Well, sign twice, Mrs. Aziza suggested with a proud little smile. Once for what's gone and once for what's coming. They signed. I saw Helen's H take shape, Rose's R stand firm, Claire's C bloom as if it had been held back for a long time. On the way out, the town had its eyes wide open. There was no escaping the whispers. Gary and Ben were leaning against the gazebo, like two misplaced commas. Reverend Henry crossed the square, stopping their tongues with his presence. Good morning, Michael, the Reverend said, loud enough for the town to hear. I heard about the paperwork. The truth, when it's written down, gets legs. Then may it walk fast, Michael replied. Gary snorted with poison hidden in his short laugh. Paper doesn't change a man's intentions. Rose turned her face and replied sharply, and a man's intentions without paper are a crime. Gary fell silent. Ben pulled his friend's arm, and the two retreated into the shadows. The day still promised a thunderstorm. Back at the ranch, Nick brought a simple wooden box with 3 small keys on a string. The boss asked me to get this made, he explained. Michael placed the box on the table and handed out the keys. Each of you has your own. Inside is everything that's yours by right. Copies of your contracts, the money from the days you've worked, and a savings book opened in each of your names. Helen put her hand to her mouth. A savings book with my name on it? With your name on it, Michael confirmed. Claire cried again, but this time with a little smile, not ashamed to feel something beautiful. Rose tried to make a joke, but her voice failed. If this keeps up, I'll forget how to talk tough. Mrs. Aziza squeezed her arm. Forgetting what hurts is a good thing, my child. In the late afternoon, Mr. Raymond appeared, hat in hand, his clothes too clean for a man coming from the fields. His face was a photograph of shame. I came. His voice broke. I came to ask for forgiveness. A heavy silence fell. Rose stiffened. Helen took a step back. Claire stood still. I was in over my head, the man tried to explain. Up to my neck in debt. They pressured me. They said it was this, or they'd take the little you had left, Michael added, without irony. Mr. Raymond nodded, his eyes shining. I don't have an excuse. I just have shame. Claire took a breath, her hand clenching the metal inside her shirt. Shame is the beginning of the path, Mr. Raymond. Helen wiped her face. The pain you gave us, life will take care of, but from now on, we're people. The man cried silently, as if emptying an old well. Reverend Henry, who had come with him, placed a hand on his shoulder. You can't fix the past, but you can keep it from happening again. Michael handed Mr. Raymond a copy of what they had registered at the county clerk's office. If anyone pressures you with a promissory note about this, you show them this and you come find me. The man tried to thank him, but his throat wouldn't let him. He left with the paper against his chest as if it were a child. On the porch, when the sunlight was already spilling through the leaves and the afternoon was calling for rest, Claire sat next to Michael. Courage was chewing on grass peacefully, as if standing guard without seeming to. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You don't need to thank me, Michael replied. Just live. A life lived is the only payment that makes sense. And have you lived again at all? He thought, looking into the distance. Today, when you signed your names, I felt a beginning. It was at that moment that Claire rested her head on his shoulder. It wasn't a kiss, it wasn't a vow, it was a rest. And Michael stayed there like someone who realizes their own body also deserves a truce. Later that night, Helen took the needle from her fabric and sang softly, a folk tune she had learned from her mother. Rose, who rarely let herself get soft, let her voice tremble along. Mrs. Aziza stirred the apple butter, watching with the corner of her eye what was happening without a fuss. A house, finally, breathing with one breath. I guarantee you those tears weren't of weakness. They were of things being put in their place. Something big was settling. And when the heart realizes that, it falls apart so it can be rebuilt better. Before going to sleep, Michael opened the house notebook and wrote, Day of signatures. The truth is out. If war comes, it comes. But today we earned a name on paper and with it, the right to hold our heads high. He closed the notebook, put his mother's rosary in his shirt pocket, and went out to the porch. Courage raised his head. The night smelled of ripe plum and cold earth. Thank you, Michael said, not knowing to whom exactly. Maybe to me, maybe to the day, maybe to the courage that had finally decided to live in that house for good. And that's how shock turned into tears. And the tears, without asking permission, turned into quiet strength. The town would still grumble. Gary and Ben still hadn't said their last word, but anyone who knows the weight of the truth in their own heart knows that when a tear washes the path, the great turning point has already begun to appear at the end of the road, waiting for the right time to show itself. The next morning seemed ordinary, but nothing on the ranch was the same as before. The truth had walked through the kitchen door on the rainy night, and since then, everything that was said carried a different weight. Claire woke up early, combed her hair calmly, and before putting on her sandals, held the metal to her chest. Michael outside checked the wagon's harness, his eyes lost in a point that wasn't there. When he saw her, the world for a second slowed down. Did you sleep? He asked without preamble. A little, but better, Claire replied, sincere. Me too, and when I slept, I dreamed that we went back to the county clerk's office every day. She smiled. It was the first time she had ever heard a dream from him. On the porch, Helen prepared thread and fabric. Rose arranged a line of new lettuce seedlings. Mrs. Aziza chopped herbs, as if marking time by the scent. The ranch had a new rhythm, the rhythm of dignity. Michael called Claire to the corral. Courage was waiting for them, impatient, as if the morning was in a hurry to be useful. Today we'll try the steps on the bank by the lake, Michael said. It's harder, but the horse knows. Claire nodded, got on the saddle with confidence, and let her body learn the terrain. Every adjustment he made to the harness was accompanied by a soft request. Lighter, look ahead, talk with your leg. At the curve of the lake, the water reflected a clear, non-threatening sky. Michael, she called without looking back. Thank you for standing between us and the darkness. He sighed. I didn't stand between you. I came with you. Claire turned her face and something that couldn't be put into words passed from one to the other. That's when Nick appeared at the gate, out of breath. Boss, what's wrong? Two men have been hanging around the quarry since early this morning. I heard shipment, Gainesville, and settle up. Michael's blood boiled, but his voice didn't lose its composure. Go get Sheriff Arlo and Reverend Henry. Tell them we have a hot lead. I'm going there to watch from a distance. Claire grabbed the reins. I'm coming too. No. Michael looked at her. If I say yes, it's recklessness, not courage. She bit her lip, but gave in. Then promise me you will come back. I promise. Michael rode off on courage at a quick pace, with Nick following him along the fence. Claire stayed at the edge of the corral, her heart pounding. Helen appeared with her hand on her chest. Rose with her fist clenched. Mrs. Aziza called them all inside, but no one could cross the threshold. It was as if the house, in that instant, was only breathing on the outside. On the way to the quarry, the wind lifted the dust in small whirlwinds. Gary and Ben were there, like crumbs of a threat on the table. In the distance, a wagon was parked, a tarp covering some boxes. Michael and Nick hid behind a bank. The conversation came in fragments. The auction got messed up. Messed up my foot? We'll find another way. The sheriff's on to us. Smart people move at night, Michael signaled to Nick. Go back and bring the law. Nick ran as if his own life depended on it. Michael stayed behind, alone with courage in the noisy silence of the woods. It didn't take long for fate, which is always punctual, to strike the clock. Gary saw Michael's shadow on the bank. Well, look at the hero, he sneered, pulling a short, rusty knife. Come to save the world again? Michael came down calmly, his hands in plain sight. Put that away and get rid of what's under the tarp. I'm in charge here. Not today. Ben came up from behind with a piece of wood. Michael dodged, but the blow hit his ribs. His body gave a half step. Courage reared, a brown lightning bolt in the clear scene, and his hoof grazed Ben's arm, who backed away, cursing. Gary came at him with the knife, aiming high. Michael grabbed his wrist in the air, and in the shock, the blade grazed Michael's shoulder. Blood appeared quickly, like an unwanted red flower. The sound of hooves and boots cut off the conflict. Sheriff Arlo, 2 deputies, and Reverend Henry arrived together. Drop it, the sheriff ordered, his gun pointed with the coldness of someone who doesn't miss. Gary dropped the knife. Ben raised his hands. One of the deputies pulled back the tarp, crates marked with the initials of local merchants, a shipment list, and 3 white handkerchiefs tied together, a sign of reserved goods. The Reverend closed his eyes for a second, as if asking God's permission to see that without hardening his heart. You're under arrest, the sheriff decreed, and anyone else on this list will answer for it. Michael put his hand to his shoulder, stopping the bleeding. Arlo approached. Can you ride? I can. Go home. The rest of the paperwork is on me. Reverend Henry touched the rosary to Michael's chest, where a drop of blood had fallen. For justice, God usually writes destiny. Michael nodded, grabbed Courage's reins, and went back. At the ranch, Claire saw the red on his shoulder even before she saw his face. She ran to him. Michael! I'm fine. No, you're not. Sit down. He tried to laugh, but it hurt. Mrs. Aziza brought hot water, a clean cloth, and alcohol. Helen held the lantern. Rose held the basin. Claire pressed the cloth over the cut, her hands firm. Did it hurt before? It did, he answered without taking his eyes off her. Before what? Before you taught me how to breathe again. No one spoke for a few moments. They only heard the pot wanting to boil wash and the crickets outside. Rose was the first to break the silence. Are they arrested? They will be, and not just them, Michael said. Today, the town begins to learn the right names of things. Helen put her hand on his good shoulder, moved. Thank you for going, and for coming back. Michael smiled faintly. When the night had fully fallen, Claire took Michael to the porch. The sky was full of stars, the kind that seemed closer in the country. Courage was grazing a few feet away, like a gentle guard. Michael's bandaged shoulder throbbed. Their hearts did too. When I saw your blood, Claire said, her voice almost a whisper, I understood that I no longer know how to exist without worrying about you. Michael looked at her slowly, like someone approaching a spring. I thought I had forgotten how to love, he confessed. Since the rain took Anna Lee, all I knew how to do was work and be quiet. Tonight, when you held that cloth to my shoulder, I felt that there's still room for life in here. He put his hand over his own heart. And life has my name on it. Claire risked blushing. Michael took a deep breath. It does, if you let it. Claire didn't answer with words. She slowly brought her face closer and rested her forehead against his. They stayed like that, for a time that doesn't exist on any clock. Then he put his hand on her chin with the gentleness of someone who knows what it is to lose. The kiss came gently, like someone slowly learning the language of love. It wasn't a movie kiss, it was a kiss between two living, wounded, and whole people. Inside, Mrs. Aziza wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. Helen, smiling, hummed a tune softly. Rose, who rarely let herself soften, spoke without looking. If this isn't hope, I don't know what is. And no one argued. In the early morning, Michael woke up with a pain in his shoulder, and before it could turn into a complaint, he felt Claire's hand on the bandage. I'm here, she said. I know. He closed his eyes and for the first time in years, slept in peace. At dawn, the house notebook gained another page. Today, love came to the porch without a sound. The horse knows and God knows too. Where pain recognized itself, life made a home. And that's how love was born from the meeting of two wounds. Not the love of those who have never fallen, but the love of those who have learned to get up together. The ranch, which had been a stage for fear and gossip, became a home of promise. Michael's wounded shoulder would heal, the town would still grumble, and justice was on its way. Right there on the line between night and day, two destinies finally found the same rhythm. And when two steps become one, even the ground seems to be grateful. The days that came after the arrest of Gary and Ben marked a new chapter, not only in the lives of those three women, but in the entire town of Serenity Creek. For the first time, paperwork spoke louder than gossip. The county clerk's office held the contracts, the sheriff had evidence against those involved in the scheme, and the town could no longer maintain the old lies. Michael's name, once spat out with suspicion, began to be murmured with respect and even regret. On the ranch, daily life settled into a tuned song. Helen found peace in her sewing and was already selling her pieces in town, proudly signing each hem she made. Rose, once consumed by anger, now harvested vegetables from the garden with a shy smile and discovered the pleasure of seeing the earth repay her kindness. Claire, always by Michael's side, shared with him the care of courage and also the care of his heart. But what changed the most wasn't the routine. It was the meaning of the pain. The pain that once weighed like a sentence was transformed into a bridge, connecting the past and the present, linking the three women to Michael. He who carried the guilt of a broken life finally understood that saving wasn't just protecting from death or shame. It was a chance to start over. And in that new beginning, love was born between him and Claire. Not an easy storybook love, but a love forged in suffering, marked by tears, scars, and overcoming. A love that in the silence of the porch and in the rhythm of the starry nights gained strength until it became a cure. The town, once so quick to judge, was forced to see the truth up close. The solitary rancher was no monster at all, but the man who risked his own honor to save three lives from ruin. And in that truth was also the lesson that often what seems like a sin is in reality a sacrifice. The final entry in the house notebook, written in Michael's firm hand, said, "Today we are no longer shadows. Today we are names, we are faces, we are the future. What began in pain ends in life." And so between suffering and courage, a home was born. A home that would never again be remembered as a place of secrets, but as the stage where pain brought hearts together and turned tears into hope. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Leave your opinion in the comments. I really want to know. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, share it with anyone you know who loves emotional stories like this one. And don't go yet. Click on the next story, because I'll be waiting for you there to live another moment full of emotion. We'll see you there.